The plan for this episode was that I would be recording another author interview to finish off my author interview series for the beginning of the year. Sadly, that has proved not to be the case due to scheduling issues that cropped up at the last minute, quite obviously because I'm here talking to you now. I am hopeful that I will be able to bring you something with this particular author at a later date. But for now, I am equally, honestly, despite how I sound, excited to be recording something about this particular novel, which is somewhat outside my wheelhouse, and I did not expect it to be living rent-free in my brain for the last 2 months. This week, I am going to be risking my life, pushing myself, testing all my abilities, and digging deep to find something resembling survival skills in order to compete with the best and the worst of humanity in the first of Matt Dinniman's popular LitRPG series, Dungeon Crawler Carl. You weren't expecting that at all, were you? Be honest. I'm Ray, an unapologetic bookworm, introvert, self-confessed hermit, and long-time depression sufferer. This is my quiet space to share thoughts as I make my way through an ever-growing to-be-read pile. Seriously, it got even bigger last week thanks to Waterstones and their sale. Join me as I explore the stories on my bookshelf, one book at a time, with 100% honest and completely spoiler-free reviews. Welcome to my bookish world, and please do enjoy your stay. The apocalypse will be televised. You know what's worse than breaking up with your girlfriend? Being stuck with her prize-winning show cat. And you know what's worse than that? An alien invasion, the destruction of all man-made structures on Earth, and the systematic exploitation of all the survivors for a sadistic intergalactic game show. That's what. Join Coast Guard vet Carl and his ex-girlfriend's cat, Princess Donut, as they try to survive the end of the world, or just get to the next level in a video game-like trap-filled fantasy dungeon, a dungeon that's actually the set of a reality television show with countless viewers across the galaxy, exploding goblins, magical potions, deadly drug-dealing llamas. This ain't your ordinary game show. Welcome, Crawler. Welcome to the dungeon. Survival is optional. Keeping the viewers entertained is not. As with every other book review, I am going to keep the detailed discussion and my personal opinion about the plot, characters, experiences, and some of the underlying themes to my review section at the end. And I am still going to maintain the whole honest and spoiler-free plan, because I really don't want to ruin everything for you. Cats can be a total pain, and as the parent of one particularly spoiled ragdoll, I can attest to that. So it's hardly surprising that Carl is frustrated when he has to chase his ex-girlfriend Bee's cat, Princess Donut, outside on a freezing cold Seattle night in nothing but his boxer shorts and a pair of ill-fitting pink leather Crocs. In that exact moment, every man-made structure on Earth collapses, killing billions instantly. Amidst the settling dust, mysterious glowing staircases appear, leading down into the earth, and a booming, bored-sounding voice makes a global announcement. The world dungeon is open. Anyone who doesn't get inside within the next few minutes will be processed with the rest of the debris. Princess Donut, being a cat, immediately bolts for the entrance, and Carl has no choice, or sees that he has no choice anyway, but to plunge into the darkness after her to keep her safe. They find themselves thrust into a massive 18-level subterranean crawl run by the Borant Corporation. This is a televised intergalactic reality show where the crawlers are expected to fight, level up, and die for the entertainment of 1 trillion alien viewers who are placing bets on their survival. The world above is gone, and for the few survivors who make it to the stairs, the only way out is down. Shortly after entering, Carl finds his way to a tutorial guild hall where he meets Mordecai, their dungeon guide. Mordecai is a weary, multiform, who changes species every floor and has survived previous cruels himself. He serves as a reluctant and often grumpy mentor. He's also a raging alcoholic, walking Carl through the basics of the interface and the rules of the game. It's during these early stages that Carl receives an enchanted pet biscuit from a legendary loot box. He feeds it to Donut, and the transformation is immediate. It grants her high-level intelligence and the ability to speak, much to his dismay, turning her into a sassy, spellcasting diva. Not that cats aren't that anyhow. Despite the apocalypse, Donut remains every bit the pampered show cat, often more concerned with her social media following and her pedigree than the immediate danger they find themselves in. The dynamic between them is brilliant, though. Carl is grounded, increasingly weary, and he's her protector, while Donut provides a constant stream of hilarious and often tactless commentary. Yet beneath the bickering and the absurdity of a cat wearing magical tiaras, that comes later, there's a fierce and touching loyalty. They're all each other's left, and their bond becomes the emotional heart of the story. As they navigate the traps and increasingly bizarre monsters, they're assigned Zev, a harried system handler. Interestingly, Zev and Donut develop a surprisingly funny and sweet friendship bond rooted in a shared, very specific interest: Gossip Girl. While Zev is technically part of the corporation running this nightmare that is torturing humanity, she becomes Donut's confidant, and the two spend their downtime dissecting the drama of the Upper East Side. Not that I'm actually up on that myself at all, so a lot of that went completely over my head. Their interactions provide a much-needed touch of levity as Zev tries to maintain professional boundaries while clearly being charmed by Donut's eccentric demands and their mutual obsession with the antics of Blair and Serena. Zev often finds herself caught between her job and her growing sympathy for Carl and Donut's plight, leading to moments of genuine sarcasm and shared frustration over the absurdity of the intergalactic bureaucracy. The situation escalates as Carl and Donut become fan favourites, attracting the attention of two very different high-profile alien talk show hosts. First, there is the Maestro, an arrogant intergalactic prince who hosts Death Watch Extreme Dungeon Mayhem. His show is bloodthirsty and cruel, reveling in the torture and torment the quarrelers are experiencing. Carl takes an immediate and vocal dislike to the Maestro's celebratory attitude towards human suffering, and he makes no effort at all to be the perfect guest and hide his feelings. This blatant disrespect infuriates the Maestro, which sparks a petty and dangerous grudge that starts on the show. The fallout of this rivalry is later revealed on a different show hosted by Odette, another influential media figure who takes a genuine liking to Carl and Donut and shows this liking through providing them with information outside of the show. She also has fondness for Mordecai. It's on Odette's show that the Porky Boy element comes to light. Having been repeatedly made to look like a fool by Carl's blunt honesty, the Maestro is so enraged that he gives a fellow crawler, Maggie Mai, a legendary skill potion of Find Crawler, specifically so she can hunt Carl down and kill him. Maggie Mai and her husband, Frank Q, become significant antagonists who harbour a deep-seated hatred for Carl. While many crawlers are just trying to survive and get to the next level, Maggie and Frank are opportunists who view Carl's defiance and growing fame as a threat to their own standing. They want him dead for something they feel he has done to them. Their resentment is fueled by the Maestro's manipulation, but it's also incredibly personal. They despise Carl's refusal to follow the unspoken rules of the crawl and his tendency to break the challenges. The intergalactic audience, however, find the Maestro's pomposity and his eventual humiliation hilarious. Fans create a viral fan fiction video they title Porky Boy Snick, which leads to the prince earning the humiliating nickname Carl's Naughty Little Piggy. These videos become a massive hit across the galaxy, further enraging and humiliating the maestro and turning Carl's survival into a high-stakes political scandal. Who would humiliate a prince and not expect some kind of vengeance? The crawl remains relentless. On the first floor, they face goblins and basic traps, but as they descend to the second floor, the complexity ramps up. They encounter everything from killer llamas and sentient mounds of slime to goblin tea parties that turn deadly in an instant. One of the standout battles involves a massive, horrifying boss on the second floor, the Ball of Pigs. This grotesque creature is exactly what it sounds like, a literal mass of porcine flesh and teeth that requires every bit of Carl's ingenuity and Donut's burgeoning magical power to defeat. The dungeon is managed by an AI who is very specific and rather foot-obsessed. This AI grants Carl achievements for his increasingly creative and explosive solutions to problems. The AI is not just a neutral narrator, it is sentient, deranged, and speaks to Carl with a mixture of gravelly intensity and disturbing fetishism. Because Carl is barefoot, those Crocs were never going to last. The AI becomes fixated on his feet, making for often comedic rewards. He describes them in unsettling poetic detail when awarding him loot boxes or achievements. This adds a layer of surreal dark comedy to every victory, as Carl has to listen to a booming voice praise the arches of his feet while he is covered in blood. Carl begins to realise that while the audience watches for the gore, he can use the game's own convoluted mechanics and the AI's strange biases against his captors. He focuses on engineering his way through problems, often using high explosives and sheer stubbornness to bypass challenges designed to kill him. He and Donut spend their time arguing over inventory. Donut wants beautiful dresses and fans, while Carl is trying to figure out how to turn a cluster of crystals into a bomb. Toward the end of the first book, the stakes for their small team grow even more bizarre. After surviving unimaginable horrors, Donut manages to acquire a rare pet egg. It's only as the book reaches its finale that we meet Mongo, who hatches as a prehistoric-looking, feathered velociraptor. Despite being a lethal predator, he is technically Donut's pet. To be fair, so is Carl, and she immediately treats him with a demanding maternal fussiness. The promise of a talking Persian cat riding into battle on the back of a dinosaur is the perfect hook for what's to come. As they move through the floors, the scale of the conspiracy begins to emerge. Carl has uncovered the dark, bureaucratic reality. Earth was seized on a legal technicality because humanity wasn't aware and didn't know how to register a formal claim to the planet's mineral rights under syndicate law. The planet was classed as unclaimed, allowing the Borant Corporation to move in and strip it for parts. A comment on colonialism, perhaps? The entire dungeon is just a profitable way for them to process the planet's biological matter while entertaining the galaxy. Carl begins to find ways to break the system from the inside out, turning his survival into a form of rebellion. He isn't just trying to get to the bottom and level 18, he's trying to take the whole system down with him. The sarcasm and wit never stop, even when things look to be at their bleakest. Every floor brings a new, more ridiculous challenge, and every victory feels like a middle finger to the trillion viewers watching them from the stars. So much happens in this book that every little detail could be considered a massive plot point, especially when some of these tiny little details come back to bite you on the backside, seriously, further into the series. But for now, I think I'm going to leave this right here. And now it is time for the traditional Being Bookish public service announcement. I honestly don't tell you about any of these books I review to influence you to read them or not. I just love sharing books that I've read, though you will know that they aren't always books that I really enjoyed reading. I like a balance. With reading, there is sadly no guarantee that you're going to love every single book you pick up. I know I don't. Or dislike something just because I said it wasn't really my thing. So always read what appeals to you. Never let someone else's taste dictate what you enjoy or what you don't. Anyway, less of that. Let's see what others thought about Dungeon Crawler Carl before I get to my feelings on the book. Bo seemed as though he felt he was being generous when he gave the book 1.5 stars and said, 1.5 stars. Chose 1 star instead of 2 because it's pretty absurd that this has such a high rating. Overall, lowbrow sums up this book pretty comprehensively. I experienced the audiobook version, first audiobook I've listened to, after people were heralding it. First off, not a fan of the audio narrator, basically doing a Kronk from Emperor's New Groove impression. Pretty much all of the character voices are annoying. Also, the audio levels are far too varied. When the main character is speaking, it's usually normal, and then there are constant AI characters that are ear-splitting loud in the mix. Extremely annoying. Beyond that, the writing is overwhelmingly generic, cliché, repetitive, sickeningly expository, like absolutely insane, non-stop exposition, and the worst kind of quirky. The generic emotions, themes that this book tries to portray are just so cookie-cutter and boring, and also feel very disjointed with the book's overall aesthetic. It wants to be goofy, edgy, graphic, and vulgar, but then tries to shoehorn in tired, sappy schlock. The premise was at first interesting, but nothing else in the book carries it any further. Really, everything else just weakens the premise. The humour is cringe. I completely understand why this book is popular, and everything about that is a bummer. It's interesting to see that the majority of reviews that are of a lower rating occurred after the book was released by a mainstream publisher, having originally been independently published by Dinniman in late 2020. I had to scroll through quite a number to get to one that wasn't commenting specifically on their opinions of the author, the recommendation source, or the intellect of the readers who enjoyed the work. As I acknowledge multiple times every episode, everyone is entitled to their own views on a book, and whether we agree with them or not, it's down to them, not us. There are many books I haven't enjoyed that others absolutely adore. Do we need to go into the whole ACOTAR debacle again? All over Bookstagram for the last week, I have seen people celebrating the announcement of books 6 and 7 of that particular series. I'm happy they're happy, but my money will be going elsewhere. The overall rating for Dungeon Crawler Carl is somewhat consistent across Storygraph and Goodreads, much to the despair of some of the readers who disliked it. I have to be honest, this is the first time I have read such anger from negative reviews in a while. In fact, it's been a really long while since I've read so much bile in reviews just because they didn't like something. On Goodreads, it has a 4.48, and on Storygraph, it's a 4.4. Of course, as with every single book, scores fluctuate, and this one will continue to do so as more people see recommendations, especially with the 8th book, A Parade of Horribles, due for release in the next few months. Right now, the book has 286,328 ratings and 38,750 full reviews on Goodreads, and on Storygraph it has 55,483 ratings and 28,700 reviews. Wow, that actually doesn't get easier to say as I repeat it. This book has obviously hit the right note for a lot of readers. though obviously not every reader enjoyed it. Though most reviews are positive, 2% or 5,647 found the book unreadable, citing multiple issues with the writing style and content. But Darren is not one of them. Darren read Dungeon Crawler Carl and thinks he's found his next series. He gave the book 5 stars and said, "Well, this was a complete surprise. I knew the books were extremely popular and the reviews were ridiculously positive, but I knew nothing about the story. Having got this from the library, I read the back cover and thought I would be getting an extremely silly throwaway novel that would pass the time but be instantly forgettable. How wrong was I? The book is silly, true, but certainly my kind of silly. It's genuinely laugh out loud funny. How could it not be when its hero spends the entire novel running around in his boxers conversing with his talking cat? I was worried the book would get too samey as they traversed the dungeons, but every room they entered was completely different and entertaining. The characters also have a lot of heart, which I wasn't expecting. There were a few sad moments, and I'm aware there's probably a lot of dark moments to come. The author says as much in the acknowledgements. I'm desperate to find out who Ferdinand is and why Princess Donut randomly mentions him without explaining anything. There's also a bonus chapter at the end that deals with Rory, who's a character that's only in one chapter near the beginning of the book. This chapter was one of the best in the book and not one I'll ruin for new readers. That makes me feel really positive going forward, that Matt Dinniman can write really fantastic characters and show their heart and humanity. Although Rory is a goblin, but you know what I mean. Joyous, hilarious, heartfelt, fun, beautiful. I think I've found my next series. I don't think you could get 2 reviews more different than these. In fact, looking at all the reviews across the various ratings, they are so contrasting that they could be talking about completely different books. I have looked at so many reviews across multiple genres, and for some reason, this one has brought out a considerable amount of spite. The book touches on several themes that could potentially be thought of as contentious, and I will be going into those in a little bit more detail in my full review. Right, now that I've mentioned what others are saying, here's what I really think about Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. No spoilers, just 100% honesty. Did I like the book? This book was recommended to me by so many people and so many times I've actually lost count, but something pushed me to add it to my Christmas list. Sadly, it wasn't one that ended up under the tree, so as I sat watching others taking photos of their present hauls on Christmas Day, I ordered it. I started out with just the one book, not sure if LitRPG, which until that point I had never actually heard of, was going to be a genre I warmed to. If you're a noob to the genre like me, here is a rough guide of what you can expect. Essentially, Lit RPG, or literary role-playing game if you want to go the long way round, is a subgenre of science fiction and fantasy where the story is governed by the explicit mechanics of a video game, so reading Halo as a character knowing they're in the game, I guess. Unlike a standard fantasy novel where the hero just gets stronger, in a Lit RPG, the characters are consciously aware of their stats. They might see a floating heads-up display, HUD, earn experience points, XP, unlock skill trees, and find loot with specific rarity tiers. It's essentially a zero to hero journey where you actually see the numbers go up. Sure, I'd heard people comparing it to a favourite of mine, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, but I already had that book, so why'd read something exactly like it when I could just read that again? The book arrived on my doorstep while I was away, and I put it on the dining table when I got home underneath a small pile of post while I picked up another book, or several other books actually, to fill the time before I went back to work. After finishing a few more books at the start of January that were on my TBR with a deadline, I figured this oddly bright covered book deserved a bit of attention, so I picked it up and read it in 2.5 days while working. Obviously, not while working, but while working my day job and then reading. I then promptly ordered the second and third books in the series, which were, at that point, the only traditionally published editions available. The independently published books were nearly £40 each, and while I wanted to read them, I didn't want to read them that much. I guess all that to say, I enjoyed meeting Carl. I could see something of my cat Darcy in Princess Donut, and I wanted to read more. The funny thing about this book is that while I enjoyed reading it, I wasn't blind to the failings, and I am going to get into those because I think a fair review includes fanfare and fault, and I am trying something a little bit new with this particular review. No one likes to focus on the negatives, and I won't be doing that specifically, but I can't just sweep them under the carpet as though I didn't see them. A balanced review should be exactly that, an acknowledgement of the bad and good which contribute to make a novel what it is. This book is more than just a book about a game. There are several deeper themes at play, including institutional cruelty, a reliance on popularity through the eyes of strangers, and found family. It's actually a pretty savage look at how systems crush the little guy. The beginning of the book bears a considerable resemblance to the start of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, with an entire planet suffering at the hands of another it wasn't aware of. The apocalypse isn't this grand, tragic destiny, it's a bureaucratic mistake. The fact that humanity is being ground up because no one filed the right notice of intent in some alien office is such a great, cynical take on corporate indifference. It turns the Borrant Corporation into the ultimate uncaring landlord that sees humanity as nothing more than unclaimed matter to be processed for a profit margin. Of course, unlike Hitchhiker, the planet is not completely destroyed in a moment for a highway. It's wiped of buildings, with anyone outside at the point of the takeover being given the chance to fight for survival in the dungeons, while also being used as financial entertainment. Social media is a blessing and a curse. For many, it is definitely far more the latter than the former, and can be seen as a necessary evil. I mean, I have Facebook because I need it for work, otherwise I wouldn't use it. A part of everyday life that could be utilised so much better and so much safer if everyone followed the same conventions. In Carl's new world, content is king. Because the dungeon is a reality show, Carl's actual raw trauma is just a meme to 1 trillion alien viewers, sort of like Love Island. Take that Porky Boy video. Carl is having a genuine screaming breakdown, but the audience just thinks it's hilarious and turns it into a viral hit. It's a really uncomfortable reflection of our own internet culture, where someone's worst day becomes everyone's mindless entertainment. And reading about these people going through horrendous trauma for the amusement of others forced me, as the reader, to reflect on the way that I use social media myself. It's a tool that can be used for good, but all too often is not. The book raised a mirror to the way that social media is used all too often to sensationalize the suffering of others. I went into this book thinking that I would perhaps find something that took me away from the heavier books I'd been reading. Instead, I started to root for Carl. Every time I picked up the book, I wanted to know how he was going to survive to the next level, dreading he wouldn't, though he's the title character, so why wouldn't he? He's a rebel with a cause, and he's not just in it to make sure he gets to the final level. He's truly concerned for his fellow players, though probably sensibly not the ones who want him dead. Carl doesn't just level up like a normal player, he fights the logic of the game itself. He's a rebel, And a perfect example of this is his battle with the ball of pigs. He doesn't use a magical sword or some chosen one power, which he doesn't have, to be fair. He uses his real-world knowledge of structural engineering and high explosives to cheat the system. He's playing a game of Angry Birds where he's the one in control of the dynamite. I love the fact that Carl has realised by this point in the game that the only way to win is to stop following the rules. And he doesn't gatekeep. He makes sure that others know what's at stake and how to stay alive. Found family is such a popular theme in many books, not just this one. In a situation where you're fighting for your life and will eventually have to fight against your friends to be the one, sort of like the Hunger Games, it wouldn't be surprising if at the beginning Carl sent Donut on her way and battled along alone. But that's not what happens. As the crawlers fight their way through the various tunnels and levels, there are so many clusters, people fighting together, showing that they believe there is strength in numbers. We have the residents of Meadowlark who stick together despite knowing that it could end in their deaths, and the daughters of the Iron Tangle who choose to fight together. Mostly it's a tactical necessity, of course, but it's also the only thing that is keeping them human, differentiating them from their captors. It's that small glitch of empathy in a cold, automated universe that gives them a fighting chance. Of course, not everything about the book can be read as a positive, and I have to be honest, because what's the point if I'm not? There are a few things in this book that irritate me, whether it's because they're problematic or because they are so overused that they're stale by the end. Sometimes it feels as though Dinniman is mocking certain tropes, yet still uses them to get an easy laugh. And this is, to be fair, a little bit lazy when there are so many ways to amuse, and he uses a lot of those to great effect. Just as I loved the important reflections on social media, the preciousness of found family bonds, and the message about capitalist corruption, I have to consider the sexism, body shaming, and stereotyping that is quite damaging and is present in this book. A number of the negative reviews focus primarily on how this is clearly a book focusing on low-hanging fruit, written to create a balance in science fiction and fantasy for men in a world where romantasy exists. Personally, I don't think that's a fair approximation of anything. There are also a number of further comments from female readers who believe it was written for dude bros and lacked any particular skill. There was one entire essay that I read on the subject because I'm always curious when it comes to reviews for works I've already finished. This particular reviewer stated, "Due to poor skills picking up science fiction and fantasy books recently, I have painfully come to better grasp that this book here is part of a category of works that are to men what romantasy is to women. I'll call it dude brotasy because it needs an uninspired portmanteau tag too, and I felt up to the task." Someone else decided that this was one of their worst 5 books of all time and declared feeling pity for the readers who enjoyed it. Personally, that's your opinion. I love Princess Donut. She's witty, intelligent, has incredible charisma, and many other characteristics that can easily be seen in every cat I've ever met, and probably every cat you've met too. However, breaking her down into her smallest parts, she's also the stereotypical high-maintenance woman, shallow, a tad obnoxious, and obsessed with fashion and celebrity. When she first gains her voice, she is led by Carl, not exactly happily, because he is the big man and can keep her safe. Or at least that's how it initially appears. It could be seen as a power construct, placing Carl in the role of cliched protector. However, it's also possible that Donut is being sensible. Carl is bigger than her, has opposable thumbs, and while she has some magical powers, she is also still very aware that, as a cat, she is vulnerable. Blatant misogynist behaviour is often used in this novel as a character trait to define someone who is morally bankrupt. The perfect example of this is Frank Q, However, he is also a nasty piece of work at his heart, and the things he has done prior to his confrontation with Carl actually highlight this, without his behaviour towards women being a further identifier of his negative character traits. Of course, you can't look at this and ignore the way that the dungeon itself has a focus on the woman, especially from their clothing to their hotness or their lack thereof. Not only that, characters like Maggie Mai, Heckler, and even Carl's deceased ex, B, are written as spiteful, conniving, vengeful, or disloyal. This theme actually continues further into the series, though I'm not going to spoil it, with Maggie Mai's loathing for Carl taken to extremes. Another theme it's really tough to ignore is body shaming. It's used to mock and deride characters in the book, to the point that many reviewers who disliked the novel felt referring to larger characters was a way to define a villain. The Maestro is a perfect example of this. He's relentlessly mocked for his size with all the Porky Boy stuff. It isn't just calling him out for being a jerk, it's making his body the punchline. You see it with the monsters too. Anything believed to be repulsive is described as greasy, sweaty, or unusually large. For some reason, a moral value has been placed on body shape, with anyone who doesn't fit the beauty standard, whether that's slim or muscular, being considered a personal failure rather than just a physical state. Tying in closely with those is the male gaze of the system, and I'm not just talking the AI or Carl, I'm talking the Borrant, the corporation, and everyone watching who has invested in it. While the book mocks the hypersexualized outfits many of the female crawlers are forced into wearing, these pieces of clothing are still described to the reader in minute detail, further enforcing how women are reduced to dressing in inappropriate and revealing costumes. They're carrying out exactly the same hard graft as their male counterparts, while dressed like Barbarella in bikini armour. The book feeds on the classic having your cake and eating it situation, criticising the cliché while still using it to grab attention. Between that and Carl's lingering bitterness towards his ex B, the book can occasionally feel like it's wallowing in some of the more toxic, angry man tropes of the genre. Ultimately, though, disregarding all that, or not disregarding it because I don't think it's unimportant, the most interesting thing about Dungeon Crawler Carl is that it's a brutal deconstruction of the genre that occasionally gets caught in the very traps it's trying to mock. So we see, it's got a commentary on sexualization of women in computer games, but it is still sexualizing them. The book also tries to critique the male power fantasy by making Carl's power come from humiliation, specifically the AI's fascination with his feet. But the reader is still given this hyper-violent power fantasy because Carl's feet are incredibly powerful and can stomp to death multiple creatures in the dungeon. The book is a walking contradiction, but I still enjoyed it. All of that having been said, I still have the first 7 books on my shelf. I am almost finished reading book 4. It only arrived this week. And I have just ordered a signed special edition of book 8 from Waterstones. I cannot wait till that arrives, but I still have 3 books left to read. No, this book and the subsequent novels in this series are not perfect. However, I don't think they were written to be the next great American novel. Sure, there may well be better novels in the LitRPG genre, but I didn't see them all over my friends' recommendation pages. If I had, I may have read those first. If you enjoyed Dungeon Crawler Carl or want to read something similar, try these. Having honestly never read a novel in this genre before I picked up Dungeon Crawler Carl, I can't honestly say with any authority, read this or read that. What I will say is that if you love snide, sarcastic characters, all-knowing AI or robots, interesting journeys, and found family, Then travel to the start of the alphabet on your trip to the science fiction and fantasy shelves in your library or local bookstore and search out Douglas Adams. If you do have any recommendations, seriously, please share them. Send me a DM on Instagram or maybe comment under the promo for this episode, because I would like to explore this genre far more in the future. The last few months have been incredible, and though I am disappointed I was unable to bring you my 4th author interview of the season, I am still hopeful that it will happen in the next few weeks. My contact has sadly been away, so I am going to get in touch this coming week to see if I can sort out a new meeting time or arrange something with someone else, because there is promise of something coming. However, in the interim, I am sure I am not the only person who took advantage of the double points that Waterstones launched for World Book Day. I ended up purchasing 7 books, including books 4 through 7 of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series and 3 beautiful vintage Jane Austen editions that completed my special edition set of her novels. I spoke with a friend last week and we're going to be starting a Jane Austen buddy read in May, starting with Emma. So if you'd like to join us, do let me know. The more the merrier when it comes to appreciating Austen's wit and wisdom. And I am very aware that this is a complete contrast with the other books that I purchased at the same time. The last time I had a chance for a catch up with you like this, it was early January. So I am happy to report that things are still going really well with my new job. I've been there since the beginning of November last year, and while it's been incredibly busy, it's nice to feel needed and know exactly where you stand. I have a very defined role. I am providing support and training and using my Canva skills, as well as having edited some video content. I'm enjoying the challenge and looking forward to even more in the months to come as we run up to a massive meeting that we're holding. Oh, I also DNF'd my first book for 2026 a few weeks ago. So if anybody has noticed that Goodreads has finally answered one of our requests and added a DNF shelf, yeah, it's been added to that one. The saddest thing about the book that I did DNF is that I had picked up and discarded 4 other books on the shelf before I selected the one I ended up not finishing. I'm not sure why I thought the writing would be any different to previous books by the same author that I hadn't enjoyed, but maybe I was a bit deluded. Sometimes we do try and con ourselves, and I definitely did on this occasion. I would like to say that I've maybe learnt my lesson, but I know that is not the case. Because I have no doubt at some point I will pick up another book by this author and try again. It's, if at first you don't succeed, try again, rather than if at first you don't succeed. Isn't it something by Einstein that's about stupidity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting different results? I think that is probably what I should be looking to. My reading progress has been a bit slower over the last few months as well. I am fully aware. I'm not going to say, oh my God, I've only read this many books, when I know that other people read a lot slower than I do, but I'm not used to this particular pattern. Over the last few weeks, I haven't even managed 1 book a week, which is very unlike me. I have enjoyed the books I've picked up apart from the DNF, yet I am still struggling. No doubt I will figure it out at some points. Perhaps I've hit a natural slowdown. Maybe it's the constant rain that we've been having, though today it was quite sunny. It was just very cold. Whatever it is, there are some incredible books on my pre-order list that I cannot wait to own, and I am really hopeful that these will kickstart my reading speed again. Not that speed reading is a thing that I'm going to sit here and go, oh, well, I'm not reading as fast as I did, and that has disappointed me. It's more that I know I'm looking forward to the books I've got. Mother of Death and Dawn, the final book in the latest Carissa Broadbent trilogy, is due out at the end of March. which means I will need to start that series relatively soon because I've got the first 2 books in that and haven't opened either of them yet. And I am one of these people who keeps on saying I'm not going to buy an entire series before I've even opened one of the books. And it's advice that I keep on giving to other people. Is it do as I say, not as I do? Or should it be do as I do because I have experience? I think it should be the latter. This release will be swiftly followed by This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me by Ilona Andrews, Rights of the Starling, which I cannot wait for, by Devney Perry. I love Ransom. And Fury Bound by Sable Sorensen. Add that to the books already bowing my shelves, the next few months will be exciting, even if I do only read 1 book a week. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the show, why not share it with your friends or family and leave a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform where you might listen. I love seeing that people are enjoying what I'm producing, but not only that, it really does help increase the number of people that see this podcast is out there. And believe it or not, we've been going for 5.5 years. You can find me on Instagram at BeingBookishPod, on X at Being_Bookish, and on TikTok at BeingBookishReviews. If you prefer reading my reviews, head to beingbookish.co.uk for the spoiler-free ones. My 2026 reading tracker is also there, and you will find all the links to the podcast in one really neat and tidy place. Until next time, this is me saying farewell.